Hi everyone, Elle Hackney here, and welcome back to my YouTube channel where I love to speak to authors, illustrators, industry professionals, podcasters, and all things book related. And today I have a publishing professional who has her own very successful podcast and has a fantastic range of picture books for children. Danny V, thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello, I haven't done many YouTubes, so here we are.
So Danny, just for everyone out there who may not be familiar with your journey, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I started the Words Nerds podcast just so I could talk to amazing authors and creatives and people in publishing and illustrators because I really had an appetite for that. I was also, neck deep in two maternity leaves with two little kids, so I needed to talk about something else other than motherhood. So what started off as something quite small has ended up with a million plays. I don't know how. I don't know, but that's part of the journey. And then I had some picture books published. You can see them behind me. And so I started writing. And as well as that, in the middle of all of that, I sort of forced my way into a role in publishing because I was like, have you done festivals? Have you done this? Have you done this? Have you done this? And I think because of my sheer enthusiasm and bossiness, James was like, sure, do whatever you want.
Got it. So the podcast came first, is that
Yeah.
correct?
Yeah, well, I've always written, but I was an English teacher for 17 years and I just never thought that anything I could write was as good as anything that I ever read. So I thought, well, what's the point? And that's not usually my sort of way of thinking, but I think it's a real intimidating, vulnerable thing to put your work out there when you're meeting great authors all the time, which I was even as a teacher. And so, yeah, the podcast came first, even though I'd always been writing in the background. And then I think I just thought, well, you know what? It's now or never, because I always think to myself, what would 93-year-old Danny do? And I don't want 93-year-old Danny to have any regrets that I didn't do. I'll have plenty of regrets, but regrets that I didn't do anything.
Yeah,
So I thought I'm just gonna do it and give it a crack. So
because I love My Extraordinary Mum. I think that's such a beautiful book. I love the Epic Dad series because there's now a few in that one there. How did you come up with that idea?
yeah, well, My Extraordinary Mum was really written out of a frustration that I was feeling as a mother because that's sort of all you became when you became a mother. And I love my kids. I love being a mum. It's a massive part of who I am and a massive part of my life, but it's not all who I am. And I feel like as soon as women become mothers, and I don't think it happens to dads as much, that you become minimized to this role. And so I was really concerned about identity. And even with kids that live with me every single day, when I started talking about what I'd done pre-kids, they're like, what? So they didn't even know who I was. And I lived with them every day. And I thought, oh, wow, they just see me as the person who tells them to brush their teeth every night. Whereas they didn't know that I'd, traveled Europe on my own, that I'd been bungee jumping, that I'd been in a band, like all these things that, I feel like the people living with you should know. And so it was really brought out of a frustration of, probably, identity. I mean, when you look at newspapers, you always say you see businessman, but you'll see mother of two. We're always reduced to that mother and minimized in that way. And I think it's important for our kids to be many things and to show them that we can do many things and achieve many things because I think that's good for them in terms of role modeling.
I couldn't agree with you more because
Yeah.
if I ever heard someone say to me, "Oh, you found someone to settle down with," I'm like, "No, I found someone crazy enough to run with me." Like
Yeah.
that's
And all this language that we still use,
yeah.
exactly like that, all this language that we use that are used to minimize women. And if you've read any of my posts or social media, I know I'm very proud feminist, and I think that we all should be, men and women and kids, because there's just so much that's still in our society that we accept or that, and I thought, Extraordinary Mum, let's make it fun. So you can read it in multiple levels. You can read it just as a quirky mum and daughter going on adventures and put it down and enjoy your life. Or you can read it in a different way and go, oh, what do my kids know about me? Do they need to know more about me? Do I need to share more about my entire self? And, obviously then you can talk about feminism as well. So, yeah.
And I want to talk about the illustration of the bath scene in that book because I understand you had to work to get that over the line, even though that is something common parents, men or women, do with their children.
Was that in the lake in the
Oh, sorry, the where she
the
was
waterhole?
bathing. And
Yeah,
yeah, the
yeah,
waterhole.
yeah.
Sorry. Yes.
Look,
Sorry.
Larrikin House are really progressive. And when I brought this, I bought two manuscripts at first to Larrikin House, and one remains in the never being published pile. That's called a rejection. And and one was Extraordinary Mum. And, as you know, Larrikin House are really progressive with their ideas, with My Shadow is Pink and Purple. And so this just fit the bill straight away. So there was nothing I had to get over the line with Larrikin
Okay.
House.
Yeah.
But there was criticism from some schools who were like, oh my God, there's nudity. And I was like, okay, for one thing, a woman's body isn't always sexualized, right? And if it is, that's kind of your problem. And don't we all bath, shower in a house with little humans? And it's actually, like, research has shown that it's really important to show a woman's body, because as it changes every day, every month, whatever, during our cycles, to show kids what an actual woman's body looks like. Otherwise they're going to think that we're supposed to look like models or photoshopped Instagrammed influencers, and that's not the case. So I sort of laughed, and I was like, well, that's a shame, because kids are like, it's not sexualized at all. It's a mother and daughter swimming in a waterhole, and she's got underpants. I'm like, I don't know what the difference is between that and swimmers. So yeah, but people are going to have their opinions, but I think that's the good thing about Larrikin House. They don't care about that.
Yeah,
like,
no, I do.
had
Yeah,
heaps of criticism, but good.
yeah, because I remember that. I remember hearing that with a conversation you had. It was a little while ago, and it really stuck with me because being an author who is trying to get published myself, you do look at things and go, well, who are we trying to appeal to here? I know that you have to be commercial, you have to be marketable, but I love what you did with that scene, because something that is natural between a parent and a child, and everyone does it, no one's put it on a page. So
Yeah.
I commend you for it. I really liked it. How did you go with your process of being signed and then seeing the final the final product? Did you have any say with the illustrator?
So I sort of kept out of the Illustrator. I hadn't sort of found a publishing position at that point. I was still an author working with a publisher at that point. And I sort of said, look, you're the publisher, I trust you, but they always would show you, this illustrator. Once we saw Alexandra Colombo, she just was we did sort of have a couple sample, but she was just perfect. I had this image of the mum in my head, but she just topped it. She made it so much better. I was like, oh my God, there she is. Like, there's my mum. And so then I just let them do their thing, and I'm not a person that dies on every hill. If there's, something I really want to have, I'll say it. But otherwise I'm like, yeah, well, this is a collaborative process. You're the publisher, you're paying for it. You've published more books than I have. So kind of rolling with that way. But it was a really cool process to see the book come alive, and in such a way where you get surprised. And this is where it comes down to the real talent of illustrators, because I had the mum and the daughter doing yoga on a mountaintop, but then the illustrator put all the animals doing yoga. And I was like, oh, that's so cool. So it's almost like there's this parallel story underneath the story I've written, which makes it even better. So that was a fun surprise. Same as Epic Dad, like the little dog in there has become this main character on every page that every kid I read it to at schools, they adore. And yet the dog's never in the manuscript.
And was that the illustrator's idea, or did you sort of work in that with?
No, she just said, can I add a dog? And I was like, yeah, why not? Like, families have dogs, cool. And she just made the cutest dog, and she put it on every page. And when I read it to kids at schools, I say, look for the dog on every page, because the dog's doing something, wacky on every page. So it's become really fun. And the kids have said, can the dog have its own book?
My epic dog.
I'll pitch that to Larrikin House now. What do you think about my epic dog?
My epic dog. How many rewrites? Well, not rewrites, but edits. Like, once your book got signed, how many edits to the final final product with it?
Yeah, My Extraordinary Mum was a lot, probably for a number of reasons. It was my first picture book. I'd done lots of writing, but not with a publisher. And James kindly said, I hate your ending. He denies it, but actually have it on video, so that's a good plus. And again, I wasn't attached to it. He's the publisher, it's his money. So I'm like, okay, I'll change it. So I say I wrote 19. I don't think I'm exaggerating. And I think at the last time I was like, look, if you don't like this one, I don't even know. Can you write it? But, we settled on the one that I wrote. But it was a lot of back and forth, and manuscript changed quite a bit because we weren't sure whose voice it was going to be. Was it the kids? Was it the mums? Was it more about the kid? Was it more about the mum? Because Larrikin House are about, buy-in for the kid. So there were probably three main rewrites of changing voice, changing perspective, and then it was just those, endings or the way things are phrased, etc., etc. But what I was really surprised about was just the amount of time, love, and care that a picture book takes to create, and that's when I sort of fell in love with the publishing side of it, because it's easy to go, oh, it's only 400 words, just slap it together and put it out there. But, from my experience of talking to other publishers, it is this huge process where everyone cares about every word, about every illustration on the page, about the cover, about everything that goes into it. And I've always thought picture books are special, but the love and care that came with it, I was like, oh, this is awesome. This is really cool to be working with people who put so much love into the work that they're creating.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, because I think everyone has a picture book memory. And I think, wouldn't it be really cool if one day this is someone's picture book memory? What was your first picture book memory?
I had a few. I was a big reader even as a little kid, but there's one that sticks in my mind that I bought, and it's called Tiki Tiki Tembo, and his whole name is Tiki Tiki Tembo No Sarambo Charibari Richie Pipi Peri Pembo. That's how many times I read it. And I was so excited to show my kids. I'm like, oh, this is like my favorite picture book at school. And when I was a kid, my parents read it to me and they were like, it's all right. So I've still got a copy. I still love it. My kids really preferred The Very Cranky Bear, but it is what it is. But I always think they're time capsules, picture books particularly, because they're read to you by your parents. They're read to you usually in bed when a parent is putting you to sleep, and those really nice quiet times. And I remember doing that with my own kids. And so I think picture books are kind of special because they're more than just the book. They're a little sort of time capsule. They're a piece of art. They're all these other things.
100%. And I think this is where you're right. Some people just totally disregard the process in total because they think it's just an easy thing. But really, no, a picture book is more than just an easy thing. It could be someone's first exposure to falling in love with reading, really.
Right. And if you get that wrong, like, you might set up a kid to never be a reader as an adult. So it's quite a big responsibility.
Yeah. And so with the Epic Dad series, because I love the camping one, I can't wait to read the skateboarding one. But how big is this franchise going to go? Because you've got the Extraordinary Mum, the Epic Dad. Where's it all going to go?
I guess now that I actually work in publishing and I see the figures, it says however long they sell for. So Extraordinary Mum was sort of done, and then I was talking to James about, publishing side and all this stuff. And he said, I've always wanted a story about an unlucky dad, but not a Homer Simpson kind of dad, but like a lovable, optimistic, adventurous dad. And I immediately thought of my own dad, who has been in hospital so many times from sporting injuries, but just loves it. You know what I mean? He'll go skiing and soccer and ankle replacement and all this stuff. And I thought, oh yeah, I've got a bit of experience to draw on from this. And so I said to him, can I give it a crack? Like, I don't know if I can do it, but can I give it a crack? He's like, sure. Do it in prose, he said. I didn't. I did it in rhyme because I just wasn't funny in prose for whatever reason. And so I spent a lot. I was obsessed with the rhyme. So it's so much time in the rhyme. And then I sent him a draft of Camping. He was like, that's it. That's exactly what I wanted. So obviously, many drafts after that. And then he's like, do another one. And I'm like, all right, fishing? And he's a bit of a fisherman, so I'm like, oh, I'm going to need some like fishing terminology and stuff. So I just watched hours of YouTube of camping fails, fishing fails, and then the next one I got into sporting fails, and I was like, oh, but don't eat dinner while you're watching parkour fails. They are brutal, right? Just brutal. So it was just about, came from, I actually love writing to brief. A lot of authors don't, but I love writing to brief. So I'm like, yes, I'll take your idea and I'll run with it. So at the moment there's 3. There's Christmas Chaos in production, and because I'm a bit stingy actually, because I want things to make money so we can keep making books. So he's like, just write another one, and I'm like, no, I'm just gonna wait. I'm gonna see if people like them and they sell, because particularly being a part of publishing, you don't want to be the person that's producing a book that doesn't sell. It's not a great look.
No.
So I'm the one who kind of holds them back. And I'm like, I'm going to see the sales figures on the first 3 first before you get this one. So, so I got signed for 6, but I've always said to Larrikin House, I only want to keep writing them as they're selling. Like if one just decides that everyone doesn't buy it anymore, I don't want to flog a dead horse, if you like. So, and I get some say, because I work in the publishing, not all the say, trust me, my influence only goes so far, but you know.
Being a professional,
you know, like it's leading by example, because you know, we ask authors to write series and they continue if they sell. So I've got to do the same thing, you know.
and so with that, I was super curious. So is the publishing house harder on you because you are in the know when it comes to working for, like, promoting it, doing school visits, all of that? Because you are in the know, are you sort of held more accountable, or are you treated just like every other author, whether you be green or experienced?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question. I don't know. I know that I'm much harder on myself, because I'm like, you know, you can't be sort of doing some work with a publishing house and they publish something of yours that is completely crap. And look, that's going to happen to every author, right? It's going to happen. But I think I'm harder on myself. And so before I pitch anything, I'll be, you know, thinking, no, this isn't good enough, this isn't good enough, which probably isn't healthy. But I don't know. Like I've had a conversation with James that I said, you know, you have to tell me if a piece of work isn't good enough or isn't publishable, because the worst thing you can do is publish something of mine that, you know, doesn't work or isn't good. So, you know, I'd rather be rejected than publish something because, you know, I work there or whatever. But now that I have an agent as well, I'm with Rochelle from Alex Adset, and she's got about 4 books or 4 manuscripts of mine to try and sell. I honestly I don't know if it's going to make a difference whether I work in publishing or I don't work in publishing. And I know from acquisitions meetings myself and being a part of them that it's got to do with so many things. Yes, it has to do with the author to some extent, but it's got to be a great story. It's got to be a commercial story. It's got to be a story that people want. It's got to be a story that hasn't been done before. It's got to be a story that works right now for this context. You know, it's got to be the right format. So there are so many things, you know, and we were looking at acquisition meetings, they're like 50 questions. And so it's being, unless you're super famous author, obviously, which I'm not, but unless you're either super famous, it's got to come down to so many variables, you know. So I think story is everything, but then I think when you get to acquisitions, it has to be more than the story, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. And that's advice that no one has actually ever given me, is you would rather be rejected than publish a book that is going to tank.
Oh, like, or embarrassed by that it's not up there. And I think you're sometimes too close to your work. I think I can tell if some of my work's crap, I'm not sure. But and sometimes you're like, no, I think this is really good. But I mean, it's all subjective, right? But I do think I would much rather be rejected 10 times than put out something that I regret later on going, oh, what was I thinking? Did I write that, you know, when I was half asleep or something? So
that was a bad idea.
I didn't publish that book. You want to be proud of what you publish and put in the world, right?
That's it. Well, that's exactly right. So with that, do you give your book to your kids and their friends to read just to test it out?
Definitely. I've got a junior fiction in production at the moment, illustrated by Jules Faber, which I'm super excited about. And I use, because my kids are 7 and 9, so I use them as my absolute sounding board for the first, it took me a ridiculous amount of time to write the first opening chapters, right? Because I'd never done a JFIC before. I wanted it to be really funny. I wanted it to appeal. And so for 6 months, I would read a chapter to my kids and they're like, it's amusing, but it's not that funny. Oh, it's okay. Oh, it's a bit boring. And so I was like, okay. But this just sort of challenged me, right? To go, okay, I'm going to get this. I'm going to get this. So 6 months of rewrites, of putting it down, of reading it to the kids, of trying another idea, of changing perspectives, all the things you do when you're trying to, Ingrid Laguna calls it like breaking the spine of the book, you know, breaking the back of the book. And it took me a really long time. And then one day I was in the lounge and I'm like, okay, what about this beginning? And they're probably so sick of me by now. But they were like, they laughed. They're like, oh, that's the best one you've done, Mum. That's funny. That's what it's supposed to be. And I'm like, okay, I finally got the opening right. So after 6 months of writing, you know, just trying to write the first 3 chapters, after they sort of went, yes, because my son's an avid reader. Like, I sort of trust his age group and he just reads constantly. So I thought he knows what's good, what's entertaining, whatever. And so then after that, I was able to write the rest of the book in like 2 months. So the first 3 chapters took 6 months, and the last however many chapters took a lot less time. So when I went into but that was being a complete newbie, right? And then going into my next book, my next JFIC, which has just been signed and coming out in 25, My Pet Crocodile, or Pet Croc, I'm not sure what its name is yet. I think because I sort of worked for like 9 months on the first book, I was kind of like, okay, I know the formula now-ish. Not an expert, but I know how to get into the book. And so My Pet Croc took me probably half that time. And then when I spoke to my agent about, she wanted me to write something with a little bit more sort of, change the world kind of edge to it. And I was able to write that in about 3 months. So I don't know what the next one will probably take me 4 years. I don't know. There's no rhyme or reason, but I feel like the first one was like that learning experience. And then it sort of was like, okay, I kind of sort of can do that again. Okay, I can sort of kind of do that again. But yeah, I always use my kids. I use them for Epic Dad as well. Did you laugh at this? Did you laugh at this? Did you laugh at this? So they're good. I know what I'm going to do when they grow up and they're not 7 and 9 anymore. I'll have to go find some new kids that age.
And he's going to be standing outside the store.
Please read my manuscript.
Yeah. So I want to talk to you about your agent experience then, because you've been, asked to write things. Is there a timeline as to, if they say, oh, can you write this? Do they say, I'll give you 3 months, I'll give you 6 months? Is that like...
I'm sure they do, but because I've only just started with them. It was last August, I think. And I had 2 picture books to give them. And then I said, to Rochelle, I also want to, do JFIC and other things. And she was like, yeah, write a JFIC. We'd like something with, these elements in it. So I'm like, yeah, cool. So there wasn't a timeline, I think, because it was like, well, the sooner you write it, the sooner I can sell it, kind of thing. So that was motivating to me. And so when I wrote it, I gave it to her quite quickly. And then for Nano, I emailed her again. I said, hey, I'm going to write a middle grade for Nano. Don't know if I can write one, but I'm going to give it a crack. Is there anything you want? And she was like, yeah, I want, I've set it on Nano, something kind of historical fiction with a feminist edge. I'm like, oh, I can do that. Well, I can give it a crack anyway. And so I just submitted that to her last week as well. And I haven't heard anything, but I'm sure with other authors, and I can only speak from my experience, that there would be timelines because, they're trying to sell it to, a publishing house they've already signed with or whatever. But so far not. I'm assuming if, they do get picked up by other publishers, maybe that's when I'll get timelines. But I think it's really motivating to go, the time's right now, strike while the iron's hot. Let's, get as much work out there as possible. And I absolutely have that belief. I just think you have to write as much as you possibly can. And you have to send it all the good bits, send all the good ones out there, and just write, forget, repeat. And it's not a criticism, but I see people, on Insta sitting by their computer refreshing, and I'm like, you're wasting your time. I work in publishing. It's sometimes really slow and we don't have time to read manuscripts quickly because we're trying to get these books out the door. We're doing publicity, like particularly in a small publishing house, you're doing everything, right? Publicity, acquisitions, you're running courses, you're talking to authors, you're doing production management. Then James has a whole other business that he does in terms of book fairs and selling to schools. So you're doing everything. So if you're going to wait for a publisher to get back to you, you're going to grow old, right? So I just have this belief, everyone wants to get published. I do, I want to keep getting published as well. But I think the best thing you can do for your productivity and for your mental health is write, submit, forget, repeat. And if they come back to you and go, yes, it's signed, celebrate. If they don't, which is probably going to happen most of our time in this industry, just write something else. Just write something else. Because the more you write, it's probability. I'm no mathematician, right? But I think the more you write, the more chance you're going to get published. So stay away from that refresh button. Publishers take a really long time to get back to you because they're really busy.
Yeah, 100%. I do want to ask though, so when submissions are open, just talking about yourself, how many books do you submit at a time?
Well, it's it's kind of an impossible question, because before children's books I was writing crime, and nothing has really happened yet. I've got a short story coming out in an anthology, I think, this year. So I was writing crime, and because crime's like 90,000 words, you would only submit one, right?
Yep.
And now with picture books, like with Rochelle, I submitted, she's got 4 at the moment. And so I think it's just, you just got to submit your good work. I mean, I really think it's interesting having the perspectives that I have, right? Because I've got perspectives from a podcaster, from a publishing house, and from a writer. And so I think when I see acquisitions, and this is just an honest opinion, don't hate me for it, but if I see 6 manuscripts by the same person, and the first 3 I'm not vibing, or they're poorly written, or it's clearly a draft, or it's not on brand, I will still read the other 3, but I'm a little bit less excited, because I'm like, they've just submitted everything on their desktop. They don't know who we are. They don't know what we want. They haven't researched us. Did they write this last night? You know, because you can tell. And so I think one hot manuscript is going to serve you so much better than 6 that are not ready, you know. And because the competition is so high, because, you know, when 1st of March comes, I'll be reading hundreds and hundreds of manuscripts. Like, just send the best work, you know, because once I'm up to manuscript 273, as much as I give them all love, and I do, because I respect the craft and I respect authors a lot, once I'm up to that point and I'm like, oh my God, you still don't know our brand, I'm not my best self. So
Cool.
I recommend, it's not about number, it's about whatever your absolute best work is that is on brand for that published, whether that's 1 or that's 10, doesn't matter. Just make it as good as you can possibly get it, and make sure it's right for that publisher, because not everything's right for every publisher, right?
Yeah, that's true. I remember the first time I met you. I did a Larrikin House course. It was 7:30 of a night time, and I wanted to know how everyone does it. I was really green when I first started, and joining the Larrikin House courses, I did a few. It really does teach you a lot. But now, Danny, I'm even more intrigued, following your journey and listening to your Words and Nerds and meeting you in person in Brisbane. You are a single mum of 2 amazing children. You have a podcast, you have published books, you work in publishing. How do you do it? Because you do it well as well.
I'm starting to feel anxious now.
Oh.
No, I'm joking. I'm joking. It's funny, because I get asked that question probably every second day by people.
Oh, really?
I just, look, part of it is brought to you by ADHD, a brain that never rests, right? So that's part of it. And the other part is I just do everything that I'm really passionate about and want to do, so it doesn't feel like a chore. So I have a lot of trouble doing nothing. That's my brain for you. I have a lot of trouble sitting there going, like, you know, meditating for me is, I love meditating and I need to meditate, but wow, it's an effort. And I just love all this publishing stuff, you know, like I love spending time with my kids and we have a really great time. And then I love the publishing side. I love the podcast. I love writing. So I feel like, and I don't sleep much, but I feel like when you love things, you find the time for them, you know. And there are times where I feel really stretched and overwhelmed, because that's part of having the type of brain I have. And so it was only this year, actually, I was in Byron Bay and I was like, oh my God, this is like the first week that I've done nothing. Like all I did was read and swam and walked and ate and slept in. And I was like, this is weird, but actually I'm kind of liking it. And so I've learned a lot of things over the last year or two. A, the ADHD diagnosis, which came last year, and B, the fact that it wasn't anxiety. I was, you know, diagnosed with anxiety and panic disorder for all my life, until I realized, oh, it's coming from ADHD. And then I learned, I know it's really obvious, right? But I just learned this year that if I sprint all the time, which I do and I enjoy doing, I actually have to force myself to rest. And I wasn't doing that. And I think then I sort of fell apart into this anxious mess of a person. And so what I'm trying to do this year, and it's only very new, is I'm trying to force myself to take those chunks of rests, whether that's 2 days on the weekend where I just do nothing, or it's that week away in Byron that I'm like not opening the laptop, You know, if I want to write because I find writing fun and pleasurable, that's not really work to me. And I'm not going to do any podcast. I'm not going to look at my emails. I'm not going to do any of this stuff that is enjoyable work but still work. So we're in Byron, and I was like, oh my God, I feel like the anxiety is like leaving my body. This is so weird. So booked another week in July, booked another week in the January following. So then you've got these things booked out into your calendar where you must rest, you know. So obviously I'm going to do little bits in between, like a day here where I, you know, have a Saturday where I don't do anything. But I think those extended breaks is how I can keep doing it all. So to answer your question, I don't know how I do it all. But there are reasons, I guess, and how I get it done. And, you know, I am overwhelmed and anxious sometimes, but I'd rather be doing it than not doing it. And I had this conversation with Sarah Bailey, who's an absolute powerhouse as well. And we both agreed that although sometimes it's hard doing all that we do, it's harder not doing it, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does, because I think as well the takeaway is it's rewarding for you, because I mean, you get to be on that phone call where you're offering someone a contract, you're making someone's dreams come true. I mean, that to help forge author careers and illustrator careers as well, and to watch a publishing house grow from its infancy to where it is now, I mean, that's all really rewarding stuff. Not to mention as well, you're setting an amazing example to both of your children that if you want to get it done, you got to get it done. So I can see why you're doing. There's so many levels to it.
My boss used to say, my old boss in my day job used to say, if you want something done, get a busy single mother to do it, because they find time that no one else can find. And I'm like, I love this theory, but can you not give me anything else to do?
No, I get it. My beautiful, amazing single mom friends, I say to them all the time, how are you not running the UN? Like, you're doing amazing.
Well, before, you know, I'll just have a little bit of a TED Talk moment here. That was part of my extraordinary mum as well, because I was doing this kind of very, you know, informal survey thing where I'd say to people, so without thinking, give me 5 words that you can describe a single mum. I'm not going to repeat them because I don't want to buy into the narrative, but they're all negative, right? They're all negative.
Oh, that's brutal.
That's the perception people have, you know, from society, from media, from whatever. And I wasn't insulted about it because I expected it. And I said, what if you really thought about it and single women are resourceful and they're good at time management and they can multitask and, you know, they're all these positive things. And then someone was like, oh yeah, of course they have to be resourceful. Oh, of course they have to multitask. Like, I've had to learn to take care of my pool and it's like my least favorite job on the planet. You know, like, you've got to do all these things. And so whenever I have that conversation with people, you offer them the alternative and they're like, oh yeah, you're right. And I'm never insulted by it because it's, you know, it's bigger than me. It's, you know, all these stereotypes that we carry with us in society somehow. But it's just about flipping things on their head, you know, and that's kind of what I try to do with all my writing, I guess, is just kind of flip things on its head and go, well, what if you saw it this way?
Yeah.
And there are things that will have to change. And, you know, I probably can't make a worldwide difference, but if I can make people think in a different way with just people around me, bring up kids who, you know, are focused on justice and feminism and all those things, I mean, that's making a difference. And if you can put those little bits into your book too, you're reaching as far as you can, you know. And I think that's really important, because when you unpack it, like, I know, you know, there are some people like, oh, we don't need feminism, everything's fine. It's like, well, we're so far from fine. We're better, but we're so far from fine that even that language that we're talking about, or those assumptions, or, you know, the way a man's perceived as an eligible bachelor, and whether like desperate cat women or whatever, like, where do these things come from? Like, I even get really upset about, you know, the phrase Karen. You're like, oh, stop being a Karen. It's like, it's just yet another tactic to silence women. You know what I mean? It's just yet another tactic to go, oh, stop talking or standing up for yourself. Like, when does it end? Unless we call it out all the time.
100%. I used to coach soccer, and the boys who were 10 used to think it was funny to call me a Karen. So I individually called them Tammy, Sarah, and Rebecca. And they were like, that's not my name. I went, well, Karen's not mine either. Yeah. So you can play that game. But that's probably childish of me.
And you can say, oh, it's just a joke. But behind that joke, there's something more insidious. And I think we need to call it out. And we need our fellow, men to call it out as well. When they hear a bloke telling a really shitty joke or something, they need to be our allies and they need to call that stuff out too. So, I mean, I think if you can just have these conversations with people, I mean, it's better than not having them, right? Don't ever
That's
ask me for
exactly
small
right.
talk. I don't care about small talk. I have no time for it. Tell me all the good stuff.
Yep, I could not agree with you more. But Danny, if anyone out there would like to follow you, contact you, ask you about your amazing books, because I really like this one. It reminds me so much of when we go camping. It's really good. How can they contact you?
I'm always on social media. Strangely enough, it calms my very busy, anxious brain. So Instagram is my favorite, Danny V, I think underscore words and nerds. I do Facebook a little bit. I've kind of gone off X a little bit for many reasons. And, I'm always sort of at festivals and I'm around all the time. I said, to Larrikin House, we need to be like glitter, bloody everywhere and impossible to get out. So that's what we're trying to be.
That's exactly what we want. So everyone out there, make sure you check out Danny's socials. Make sure you check out her books. They're fantastic for age ranges, mainly from 4 to 12. You would say that, Danny, for these
The
ones?
books, yeah, look, probably three to eight. But my kids are 9 and 11, and they love a picture book, and I try and encourage it. And fun fact, when I was a high school teacher, I used to bring picture books into Year 12 because we used to do visual literacy. So I think they're ageless, 0 to 99.
0 to 99. So thank you so much for speaking with me today, Danny, and I hope we can chat again in the future.
Thank you. Thanks for asking me on.
Thank you.